Hello everyone, it's Frank again with a new budget mud truck video. Today we got quite a doozy of a video for you. We're finally installing the Dana 80 in the rear of the budget mud truck. Half ton no more, it will now be a 3/4 ton I guess, until I install the front 1 ton axle, then it'll be a 1 ton. So first thing to do was get the Dana 80 underneath the truck. The Dana 80 is a pretty hefty axle. So if you're planning to do this yourself, make sure you lift up the truck high enough on the jack stands so you don't have issues like I did. I ended up having to remove a tire just to get it under, and then later on the suspension also gave me some trouble to the point that I had to use an engine hoist to lift up the back of the truck. All because I didn't put the jack stands high enough in the beginning. At this point it was just making sure it was all lined up and getting the axle to face the correct direction. As you can tell, when I removed the rear drive shaft that was originally on the budget mud truck, I left pretty much the whole suspension, including the shocks, leaf springs, everything. The reason for that is because I'm going to reuse a lot of it, mainly the leaf springs. The shock absorbers, I'm actually going to switch over to the ones that came in the 3500. And the lift locks, I'm actually going to switch out to the ones that came out in the 3500. The only reason I'm not using the 3500 leaf springs is because they are 3 inches instead of 2.5 inches. But me being a genius, I didn't get the leaf spring mounts from the 3500, so they don't fit in my budget mud truck's 2.5 inch mounts. You'll also notice the Dana 80 has mounting points for a sway bar, and the 3500 had the sway bar. However, the budget mud truck did not have a sway bar. Now, I don't know if that is because the 1500s didn't bring them or if someone removed it, but until I figure that out, I won't be mounting the rear sway bar, seeing as the axle has a mount for it, but the chassis doesn't. Here's a comparison of the lift blocks between the 3500 and the budget mud truck. You see there's a substantial difference in size, and that's why at the point I had lifted it on the jack stands, they didn't really fit in there. Especially not because I have an extra lift block that goes on top of that one. Since it has no axle in it, my jack does not reach high enough to lift up the truck. So I ended up having to use an engine hoist to lift up the truck from the hitch high enough so I can put the jack stands at a higher point. Once the jack stands are in place and everything's high enough to be able to put the suspension under, I pretty much do just that. I put the U-bolts, I swap out the shocks, and I put the lift blocks. And through the power of video editing, you're going to see that all happen in just minutes. With the suspension complete, all that was left was the brakes. When I removed the original axle, I had no choice but to cut the brake hose because the fitting was stuck to the fitting of the brake line. Installing a new one wouldn't be much of a problem, however, it did mean that I had to flare the brake line and put a new fitting on it. That I'm going to put in a separate video, and I'll most likely upload that probably next week or so. Removing the cut brake hose wasn't that bad. A couple clamps to take off the lines from it, and then just swapping in the new one. The most difficult part was making sure I put it in the correct direction. Initially, when I was removing the original axle, I noticed that the breather hose was much bigger than the breather hose on the Dana 80, which was weird because it's a smaller axle. Maybe it was an aftermarket breather, I don't know. So what I did, when I swapped them, I ended up putting the breather hose, both the little tip and the actual hose, from the old axle into the Dana 80. As you can tell, the difference was pretty big. Once everything was in place, it was just tightening it all up. Once the brakes were done, I was getting ready to drive the truck forward and kind of turn it around just to test it out. I didn't want to go too crazy since the brakes probably need burping or bleeding or something. And something kind of interesting happened. The mail truck did something weird. So that was actually the mailman who was driving around, and apparently his car stalled or something, I don't know, but it made a lot of noise, puffed out a lot of smoke, and it almost sounded like a diesel, which is a bit surprising. But enough about the USPS. We're here for the budget mud truck, and it's done. The budget mud truck is rolling along with a 1-ton rear axle. I definitely gained some lift in the process. It seems like it's actually level, even though the rear tires are 30 inches and the front tires are 35. Which kind of says something, and it'll only get taller when I put the actual tires I have for it, but that's for a future video. As always, if you guys enjoy this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching.